It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Italy. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 25 on the players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Italy's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examine the participation of players in games over the recent period and categorize them into their likelihood of making the final squad. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is known. At that time, we'll go back over the list we create here and compare to see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode will have three parts. In section one, we look at some general information on the team. Section two, we cover the main candidates in each position and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. And section three, where we summarize and have some concluding business. Let's begin then. We begin with section one, so some information or comments on the squad, beginning with retirements. And we have a few. We have central defender Giorgio Chiellini. He had 117 caps for the national team and 8 goals between 2004 and 2022. He mostly played with Juventus there for 18 years, but then at the end spent a year with Los Angeles FC in the USA. And he was part of the team since the 2008 Euro Cup all the way to Euro 2020, where he was the captain. So he announced his retirement in April of 2022 and actually retired from soccer altogether in December of 2023. Next, we have Lorenzo Insigne. He's the second of our three. And he had 54 caps and 10 goals from 2012 to 2022. His main team was Napoli. He was with them for 12 years, from 2010 to 2022. And he's actually still playing. He's over here in Canada playing for Toronto FC since 2022. He was part of the team or tournament since the 2014 World Cup. All the way to Euro 2022, but last appeared for the national team in March 2022. So I should say this section is not really so much retirements as players who are no longer playing for the team. And the same is true for Salvatore Sirigu. You see his name is in black there, which means he's not officially off the team, but he played for Italy since 2010 to 2022 is the last time he played for them. And he's still active playing in Turkey and never really got past the starting keepers to be a starting goalkeeper himself, but nevertheless was selected for all tournaments from Euro 2012 to Euro 2020. So he last played for the national team in March 2022, but now seems to be off the team, Salvatore Sirigu. Okay, let's move on to our next section and look at the club, kind of a club affiliations of Italy. Almost all of them play in Italy. If they don't play in Italy, they pretty much got to be playing for a major team in a major league, because at least in the past, it was kind of like if you left Italy, say, for example, to play in Toronto in Canada, then you were kind of forgotten about as far as national team goes. So we have, of course, the major teams of Italy: Inter Milan, Roma, AC Milan, not as much represented as one might guess, and Juventus, and lots of other good teams there as well. And outside, we have goalkeeper Donnarumma with Paris Saint-Germain in France. He's the only one in France. Most of them, if they go outside of Italy, are in England. So we have backup keeper Vicario with Tottenham in England, midfielder Jorginho with Arsenal in England, and defender Udogi also with Tottenham. There are a couple of others besides. Okay, and then just one other country, we have a player in Turkey with Fenerbahce, that's Leonardo Bonucci, who is getting close to retirement. He's 37 years old, but still active here in our list. So, okay, that is the club situation. Let's look at recent games. So we're not going to look at actual games because we're focused on players rather than teams. Just to say here that we're examining the participation of players from the start of 2023. So in that time, Italy played 12 games. As far as international tournaments go, they did not make the 2018 or the 2022 World Cup, shocking to Italians. However, they were the champions of Euro 2020, so really going from bottom to top to bottom again. So in our histories, we will cover whether players were part of Euro 2020, but in order to be more efficient here, we're not going to go back farther than that for the most part. And let's go to their formations. Italy usually uses a 4-3-3 formation. That's in 75% of the games. So in 8 of the 12 games, it was that 4-3-3 formation. In the third game, they used a 3-5-2 formation, a bit of an unusual one there. And in the last 2 games, they went with a 3-4-2-1 formation. So in all 3 of those games, that's 3 at the back. 3 central defenders. So the basically the left backs and right backs pushed up to become wingers, which we'll mention again as we go through. Finally, our last order of business is a look at their upcoming friendlies in June, and these will be particularly interesting because a lot of positions are unsettled for Italy, so I'll be interested to see who's getting the starts in these 2 games. The first one is on June 4th, that is at home to Turkey, and then on June 9th at home to Bosnia-Herzegovina. Okay, that is it for section 1. And we move on to the main part of the media cast, a look at the players. A look at the candidates. We begin with the manager, so not a player at all. And sorry, I just have to find my spot here. There we are. The manager. So we have outgoing manager Roberto Mancini. I'll just highlight his name in red. That's actually bad luck in Korea, where I lived, but so I'm kind of loath to do it. But just to indicate that he is not the current manager, let's we won't look at him. We'll cover it in the summary of the position, as it were. We have incoming manager Luciano Spalletti, and I will give some information on him. He has been manager of the national team since 2023 here. He was manager of Napoli before that and Inter Milan before that. And also Roma and Udinese earlier in his career. Just one time it was a club outside of Italy, and that was Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia for 5 years there. Spalletti, so now manager of the team. As a player, he actually did play professionally in the 1980s and early 90s, but didn't earn any international caps. So Luciano Spalletti leading them through. I should put his name actually above Mancini there. And just a summary of what happened. Mancini came in after Italy failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup, and he led them through their 2020 Euro Cup title. So he went from the highest high to the lowest low, though, when they failed to qualify for the 2022 World Cup. Surprisingly, Mancini survived that and remained their manager at the start of qualification for Euro 2024. But shortly into the campaign, after 2 games, he stepped down. That was in August 2023, and was replaced by Spalletti, who saw them through to this tournament. Okay, let's begin looking at the players, and we begin with goalkeepers. And I'll just mention the players and their likelihood, and some of the less likely ones I'll deal with quickly. We'll focus on the main players here. So we have a definite candidate in Gianluigi Donnarumma. He's actually the captain of the team. And then a likely candidate in Guglielmo Vicario, and then 2 possible candidates, Alex Merritt and Ian Providel, and then possible but unlikely Marco Cornacecchi. And I will just talk about him briefly here. First appeared actually in March 2023, so came in recently, and didn't get any starts, but was on the bench for 3 matches, including the last match. And he was with the under-21 team or under-23 team a little bit, and not selected for 7 matches. So if he was on the bench for the last match, maybe I should put him as possible, but he is possible but unlikely. We'll leave it at that. And then we saw Salvatore Sirigu, who we'll say seems to be off the squad. He's not officially retired, but has not played for the team since March 2022. So let's take a look at a closer look at the main candidates here. Gianluigi Donnarumma is 25 years old and has been with Italy since 2016 with 61 caps now. And as we said earlier, he plays for Paris Saint-Germain in France, and was with that since 2021, and was with AC Milan for 6 years before that. He was the starter in Euro 2020 tournament, and recently has started 11 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, just the last match that he was on the bench for there. So Gianluigi Donnarumma, a definite candidate. Likely candidate, Vicario, is 27 years old and new to the team since 2024, but he does have 1 cap there. He plays for Tottenham in England since 2023, and was with Empoli and Cagliari in Italy prior to that. So, of course, not part of Euro 2020 because he's just come into the picture. He got his first appearance on the bench actually in September 2023, and then he was the one who started the last game when Donnarumma was on the bench. So he has been on the bench for 8 games himself, and then he missed 3 games due to injury or illness. So Vicario looking like the backup keeper here. Next, the possible candidates, we have Alex Merritt, and he didn't start any of their games, but he was on the bench for 9 of them, and not selected for the last match. And also possible is Ivan Providel, and he got his first appearance on the bench in September 2022, and was on the bench for 2 games, but he was out with injury, actually 2 separate injuries, for 4 games, including the last 2 matches, although he has recovered from injury. So after doing all that, it seems like Marco Cornacecchi came in really to replace Providel. That's probably why we had him as possible but unlikely. Got to admit and be honest, I can't remember what my thinking was at the time when I placed them. Anyway, let's summarize the position of goalkeeper. So pretty clearly it's Donnarumma. He started all games except the last. Vicario stepping into that game, suggesting that he is the backup keeper. maybe just to give him a bit of experience with the team there. So fairly clear in the goalkeeper. The only thing we're not sure about is who the third and possibly fourth backup keeper will be. But let's move on to defenders, and we begin with central defenders. Now here we have, must be 7 possible candidates, so no definite and no likely, and you'll see when we get to the summary of the position what's going on exactly. Anyway, the first of I've tried to put them in order of kind of likelihood here. First is Francesco Acerbi, the first possible candidate. Next, Alessandro Bastoni, then Gianluca Mancini, Giorgio Scalvini, Alessandra Buongiorno, Federico Gatti, and Leonardo Bonucci. Obviously the most well-known name among them. And then we'll come back to those players. We have a possible but unlikely candidate in Rafael Toloi, who actually did get a couple of starts for the team. He started 3 of the first 4 of their games. Then he was out with injuries and not selected for 4 others, including the last 2 matches. So still room for him to come back in, but there are so many candidates here that one can never know. And then we have a couple of players who are off the squad. Alessio Romagnoli has not appeared for the last 6 matches. And Nicolo Caselli also not appearing for the last 6 matches. And then in the retirement section, we have Giorgio Chiellini, who has announced his retirement, both from the national team and from soccer. So a lot of players to look at here. Because they're all at the possible level, we won't go into too much detail on them, but maybe the first few, because they would be the most likely among these. So we begin with Francesco Acerbi. He is 36 years old and been with the team since 2014 with 34 caps and 1 goal. He was part of Euro 2020 squad, but just a substitute there. He has the most starts among these players. He started 6 of the 12 games. However, he was not selected for the last 2 matches. Next, we have Alessandro Bastoni, 25 years old with 22 caps and 1 goal since 2020, also part of Euro 2020 squad. And both he and Acerbi actually play for Inter Milan in Italy. And Bastoni started 4 of their 12 games there, but he was actually out with illness and injury quite a bit, though. He is fit to play, though, so is a candidate here. Next, we have Gianluca Mancini, 28 years old, with Italy since 2019, and 12 caps and 0 goals, plays for Roma. And he returned after a year-long absence in September 2023 and started 3 of their remaining 8 games and was on the bench for 4 others. So actually a good chance of making the squad, perhaps likely in terms of making the squad, but among the possibles for being a starter. Next, Giorgio Scalvini is 20 years old and has 8 caps since 2022, plays for Atalanta in Italy, and got his first appearance on the bench in June of 2022 and started 4 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, on the bench for 3 and injured for 2. Next, Alessandro Buongiorno. He is 26 years old and has 3 caps since 2023, so fairly new to the team here. Plays for Torino in Italy since 2018 and got his first appearance in June of 2023, started 3 of their remaining 10 games and was on the bench for 3 others, injured for a couple, Buongiorno. And next, Federico Gatti. He is 26 years old, 3 caps since 2022 and plays for Juventus in Italy. And he got his first cap in June of 2022 and started just one of their 12 games since the start of 2023, but not selected for the last 2 matches. So somewhat unlikely here. Finally, we come to the big name, Leonardo Bonucci. He's 37 years old, so reaching the end of his career. 121 caps and 8 goals since 2010. And since playing for Juventus, his second stint with them from 2018 to 2023, he's been with kind of retirement clubs a little bit. Union Berlin in Germany and Fenerbahce in Turkey. Okay, Fenerbahce's not a retirement club. So that's actually a pretty good club for his age. He's been on in tournaments since the 2010 World Cup, including a starter in all 7 games of Euro 2020. And he actually started the first of their 12 games since the start of 2023, but then was on the bench for 1, injured for 3, and not selected for 5 matches, including the last match. So that means he was around for the second last match and maybe in the mix here, especially given the situation. So that's a lot. Let's summarize the position. So as the list suggests, there's no player and certainly no partnership emerging among the central defenders. In the last 3 games, in fact, 7 different players were in the position. And so we can only kind of judge according to how many starts each has over the period. And as we saw, Acerbi leads the way with 6. But that's still only half of the games. The next most common has 4. So really, it's anyone's guess as to who the starter will be. We have to wait really until the June friendlies, which may shed some light. Wow, that was really a mouthful, kind of uncertain, and we're going to honestly see that all the way through, except it won't be that complex because that position has 2 and sometimes 3 players playing in it, whereas most of the other positions will just be dealing with one player in the position. And that's true of left backs, which we move on to, and have a definite candidate in Federico Di Marco. And then 3 possible candidates here, no likely. We have Destiny Udogi, Andrea Cambiaso, and Cristiano Biraghi. We also have a possible but unlikely candidate in Leonardo Spinazzola, who I'll deal with here. He was a starter in Euro 2020, so some experience with the team. 24 caps since 2017 and plays for Roma. I shouldn't be giving so many details on him. He started 2 of their 12 games over this period, but he was injured for the last 2 matches and had not started or had not been selected for 5 games before that. So it looked like he was drifting off the team. And on top of that, Spinazzola has been out with a hamstring injury since mid-May, so he missed the last 2 games of the season for his club. Although he is expected back before the tournament begins. He's expected back on May 29th, so it mustn't be a very serious hamstring injury, as many of them seem to be. So Spinazzola, though, kind of a doubt all the way here. We have a candidate who seems to be off the squad. That's Emerson, or Emerson Palmieri, and he last appeared for the team in March of 2022. He was, though, selected for the Euro 2020 squad, where he was a substitute and gained a starting position for the last 2 games, but now seems to be off the squad. He plays for West Ham in England. Okay, let's go back and look. We've looked a bit too closely maybe at those unlikely players, but we're going to look at the likely ones. Federico Di Marco, 26 years old, and 17 caps and 2 goals since 2022. And he plays for Inter Milan, actually, his second stint with them since 2018. He has started 7 of their 12 games over this period, since the start of 2023, and he subbed in for 2 as well. So 7. He was injured for the first 2 matches, so that so usually selected is what I'm saying, and never. The only time he wasn't selected, it was because he was injured. Okay, I'll try to pull myself together a little bit here. I'm all over the place. We have the first of our 3 possible candidates in Destiny Udogie, and he is with Tottenham in England. He has been with Italy since 2023 with 3 caps. And but none of that matters because he's out with a hamstring injury since late April and an unknown return date. Usually hamstring injuries are kind of longer term, so I'm not expecting that we'll see him in this tournament, but we will update that in part 2 when we get a bit closer to the cup. So it looks like Udogie will be out of the picture. We have Andrea Cambiaso, and he just joined the team here in 2024 and started one of their games and subbed in for 1 game. He actually was on the bench too in November 2023, just got his first cap in 2024. So he is looking like a candidate, just coming in at the end there. But we also have Christian Biraghi, who is 32 years old and with Italy since 2017. 17 caps and 1 goal, and Biraghi plays for Fiorentina in Italy since 2018, briefly loaned to Inter Milan there. He returned after a 15-month absence. He'd actually been selected for the preliminary squad for Euro 2020, but didn't make the final cut. Returned after a 15-month absence in September 2023. Didn't start any games, but he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 1. But not selected for the last 2 matches. So Biraghi looking much less likely, I would say, than Cambiaso. Let's go to the review of the position. So it's usually a left-back position in the 4-3-3. But in the 3 games where they used 3 central defenders, this position pushed up to a winger role, so a left winger position. However, it was the same players who occupied the role when it was a winger position. Spinazzola played 2 of the first 3 games. DiMarco had been injured for the first 2 of those games, and in game 4 he resumed the position and actually dominated it until the end. Udogie got a couple of starts towards the end, but if that represented a challenge for the position, his injury seems to have put an end to it. So right now it looks like Cambiaso is the most likely backup. Let's move over to the right back position. We have no definite candidates here, but a likely candidate in Giovanni Di Lorenzo. And another likely candidate in Matteo Darmian. We have a player who seems to be off the squad here, David Calabria. And he last appeared for the team in June of 2022. So not really part of the discussion here. Let's take a closer look at the 2 candidates then. Giovanni Di Lorenzo is 30 years old, and he has 34 caps and 3 goals since 2019. He's played for Napoli in Italy since the same year, 2019, and he was part of the 2020 squad, a substitute in game 1, and then gained a starting position after that. And he started 8 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, subbed in for 1, suspended for 1, and on the bench for 2 others. So Giovanni Di Lorenzo, a likely candidate. Also likely is 34-year-old Matteo Darmian. He has 42 caps and 2 goals since 2014 and plays for Inter Milan in Italy since 2021. He was a starter in the 2014 World Cup, but not part of the squad for the 2020 Euro Cup. He had been off the team actually for quite a while before that, so wasn't even a consideration for that squad. But obviously he's come back to the team, and he has started 3 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, as well as subbing in for 3 and being on the bench for 6 others. So almost a definite candidate to make the squad, and we'll see about his chances of being a starter. Let's summarize the position. Di Lorenzo played all but one of the games in the early going. He played the left winger role when it was a 3-5-2. We saw that the right backs pushed up to, or the left and right backs pushed up to winger positions. I said left back, but I should have said right back there. So both the right back and the right winger when it is a right winger role. Darmian had 2 starts in the second half of the period. Di Lorenzo was suspended on yellows for one of those. In the last games, the 3-4-2-1 formation, Di Lorenzo actually moved back to become a central defender on the right there. And we had 2 new candidates coming into the position as wingers. One of them was Cambiaso. We saw him as a left back there. And the other one is Bellanova, who we'll see soon as a right midfielder. So a bit kind of confused at the end there. And Di Lorenzo ultimately looking more like a defensive back than a winger. Okay, let's move on to defensive midfield, or actually to the midfield in general, and defensive midfield in particular. Actually, we only have one candidate as a defensive midfielder, and that is the likely candidate, Jorginho. We do have a couple of players here too, Sandro Tonali and Marco Verratti, but we've moved them over to left midfielder since that's where we see them in this period. So we only have Jorginho to look at. He's 32 years old and has 52 caps and 5 goals since 2016 for the national team. And he's been with Arsenal in England since 2023 and was with Chelsea in England for 5 years before that. He was actually born in Brazil and moved to Italy when he was 15 years old. And he was a starter in Euro 2020. Okay, he has started 5 of their 12 games since the start of 2023 and was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 4 matches. So even a couple of other factors make us think that he's a likely start or a likely candidate here. So Jorginho, a likely candidate. Now, before we move on to the summary of the position, we're going to look at central midfielders because the 2 overlap. So we have a definite candidate in Bryan Cristante. We have moved actually David Fratesi to the right midfielder role, so we'll talk about him a bit later, even though he's coded as a central midfielder. Manuel Locatelli is our possible candidate here. And we have a player who seems to be off the, or is possible but unlikely. That's Michael Folorunso. He doesn't have any caps for the national team. First appeared on the bench in March of 2022. March of 2024. He was on the bench for 1 match, but not selected for the other. So they seem to decide pretty quickly. Again, we'll talk more about him if he does make it to the squad, but we want to focus on the main candidates here. So Bryan Cristante The definite candidate is 29 years old. He's been with the team since 2017 and has 38 caps and 2 goals in that time. Cristante plays for Roma in Italy since 2019 and has started 4 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, as well as subbing in for 5. However, he was injured for the last 2 matches in March of this year. Injured, interestingly, for the national team, but not for his club team. He didn't miss a game during that period. So whatever that means, the injury is not threatening his participation in this tournament. So Brian Cristante, definite, we think, to make the squad. Manuel Locatelli, our possible candidate, is 26 years old, and he has 28 caps and 3 goals since 2020, and joined Juventus in Italy in 2023, was with Sassuolo for 4 years before that, also in Italy. He was a starter in the 2020 Euro Cup. He did lose his starting position there, actually. But after that, he was off the squad, so he returned after a 15-month absence in September 2023 and started 3 of their remaining 8 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2, and he was injured for 2. So a possible candidate here, and actually maybe, given the lack of other candidates, slightly more than possible. Now we can summarize the position of both defensive and central midfield. If you think about the 4-3-3 formation, then it's the same thing, really. So we're dividing the 4-3-3 up into a kind of central or defensive midfielder with a left and a right midfielder in that three-man line. But as we saw in the last 2 games, it was there were 2 in this position. Okay, and the players in the position are Jorginho and Cristante. They rotated at first, and then a bit later, Locatelli was added to that rotation mix. Cristante dropped out towards the end. He was injured for the last 2 games, but perhaps not seriously injured, so he may come back. Left midfielder Bonaventure and right midfielder Barelli each partnered one of these players in the last 2 games when it was a 2-man position. So really, there's no clear candidate amongst the 3 main candidates here. That's Jorginho, Cristante, and Locatelli. So we might have to wait until the tournament, or at least the friendly games, to shed more light on that. Okay, well, a lot of teams don't really have right and left midfielders anymore, but Italy does. It really only exists in the 4-3-3 formation, and we've actually decided to deal with right midfielders here first, because it fits the narrative better. So let's begin with the 2 definite candidates. Nicolo Barella, a definite candidate as right midfielder, and David Fratesi here. Frederick Chiesa is coded as a right midfielder, but we're moving him to another position, so we'll deal with him later. We have a possible candidate in Raul Bellanova, and then possible but unlikely Manuel Lazzari. Manuel Lazzari, not selected for the last 3 matches, and had come back after an absence there, so not really making inroads into the team. And we also have a player seemingly off the squad in Federico Bernardeschi, who last played for the team in June of 2022, so not really a consideration at this point, even though he was part of the Euro 2020 squad. So Bernardeschi, we won't talk about him anymore, but we'll focus on the main candidates. Nicolo Barella is 27 years old and has 53 caps and 9 goals since 2018 for Italy, and plays for Inter Milan since 2020. He was a starter in Euro 2020, and he had since started 9 of their 12 games since the start of 2022, subbed in for 2 and injured for 1. So that's why we have him as a definite candidate. And then we have David Fratesi, who is younger, 24 years old, with 13 caps and 4 goals since 2022. And he's been playing for Sassuolo in Italy since 2020. But he has been on loan to Inter Milan since 2023 and was actually loaned out quite a bit. Fratesi has no tournament experience, but he started 6 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, subbed in for 3, on the bench for 2, and it was only the first match in this period that he wasn't selected for. So always selected David Fratesi, and so we have him as a definite candidate. Our possible candidate is Raul Bellanova, just new to the team since 2024, once he got his first cap. He appeared on the bench there in one of the games and started the last game. So Bellanova, a late kind of entry and a possible candidate. Let's look at the position. So again, the 4-3-3. This is the left side of the middle line there, which is used 75% of their games over this period. So on the right side, it's fairly simple. Barella and Fratesi alternate back and forth in this position. Barella, though, switches to the left side often when he's not playing on the right. So that's why he has more caps, 3 more caps than Fratesi in this period. Okay, now we are ready to go over to the left and look at the candidates here. So we have Giacomo Bonaventure, who we sometimes saw as a defensive midfield when it was 2 players. I think we just saw him once, actually. And we have Sandro Tonali as a possible candidate. I made a mistake there. Both of those are possible candidates, Bonaventura and Tonali. We have Marco Verratti as a player seemingly off the squad. He was part of the 2020 Euro Cup squad and an experienced player with 55 caps and 3 goals. And he was playing for Paris Saint-Germain in France from 2012 to 23. And in 2023, he moved to Qatar, Al Arabi in Qatar, which many see as a retirement move. And it seems to have been for him because he has not been selected since the beginning of 2023. So kind of coinciding with that move to the Middle East. We also have the player we showed as in part 1 as a retired player. Or no longer playing for Italy. That's Lorenzo Insigne, also a very experienced player who was selected for the Euro 2020, but who hasn't played since March 2022. So neither of those really in the picture at this time. So we just have the 2 possible candidates to discuss or to introduce further. So Giacomo Bonaventura is actually quite old, 34 years old, and he's been with the team since 2013, but only has 18 caps and 1 goal in that period and has never been called up for a tournament. He plays for Fiorentina in Italy since 2020, was with AC Milan for 6 years before that. So he did return after a 3-year absence, so it's kind of on and off the team briefly. Returned in October 2023 and started 3 of their remaining 6 games and was on the bench for 3 others. So this is an opportunity for him to finally make a tournament in his twilight career. Twilight years of his career. The other one is Sandro Tonali, who ultimately won't provide any competition, just like Verratti won't provide competition. And I'll tell you why in a second. But a little bio on Tonali. He has 15 caps and 15 caps and no goals since 2019. And he's just 24 years old, so getting quite a bit of a foot into the team. He plays for Newcastle in England since 2023, was with AC Milan before that. And he started 2 of their 12 games since the start of 2023. However, he is under suspension. He's under suspension from late October until August 2024 because of illegal betting. One source called it a gambling addiction, and I think he either was in rehabilitation or forced to take it, whatever the story is. But basically suspended from all football for a year because of this betting thing. Betting. Yes, I can't find a word. Anyway, so Tonali out of the picture, Verratti out of the picture. Let's summarize the position. So it was Verratti, Tonali, and Barelli, each starting 2 of the first 6 games. Barelli, the right midfielder who we met just before. In the second half of the period, though, it was Bonaventure alternating with Barella. So again, just a possible candidate here, but the door seems to be opening for Bonaventure here. Okay, that is the defensive end of the field. Let's move upfield to more attacking. So we are reorganizing kind of things into kind of a left attacker that's in the upper left quadrant of the field, and it includes it sometimes includes wingers if they're kind of coded as attacking wingers, but attacking midfielders on the left or right side, or else left and right forwards, which is what we get with Italy in the 4-3-3. It's usually a left forward and a right forward. So that will be these players, and the centre forward will be covered separately. So let's look at who we got. We have Frederic Chiesa. He's coded as a right midfielder, but we're moving him to left attacking here, because that's where he's mostly appeared in the period. So he's a possible candidate, Federico Chiesa. And we have several other possible candidates, Lorenzo Pellegrini, Mattia Zaccagni, and Stefan El Shaarawy. All of those possible candidates. We also have a player who seems to be off the squad. That is Vincenzo Griffo, the German-born player. He last appeared for the team in March 2023. So we won't spend much time on him here. Let's go back and look at our 4 possible candidates. Federico Chiesa is 26 years old, been with Italy since 2017, 46 caps and 7 goals, and was part of the team for the Euro 2020, ended up being a bit of a hero in that tournament, despite the fact that he started as a substitute and only later gained a starting position. But Federico Chiesa has only started 3 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for the last one, but he was out with 2 separate injuries for 6 games. And not only that, he had been out for 6 months in 2022 with a 3rd separate injury. So really struggling with injuries over the past couple of years. Federico Chiesa, a possible candidate. Lorenzo Pellegrini, our second, is he's 28 years old and has 18 caps and 2 goals since 2017. He was actually selected for the Euro 2020 squad, was Pellegrini, but he was injured before the tournament and had to be replaced. So he plays for Roma in Italy, and over the past year and a bit, he has started 2 of their 12 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1. He too, though, was out with 2 separate injuries for 4 games and not selected for 3. So not convincing as a candidate here. We have him at the possible level. Next, Mattia Zaccagni. He has 4 caps since 2022 and plays for Lazio in Italy. And he got his he got his first cap in March of 2022, but then was off the team and returned in September 2023 and started 2 of their games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. But like the others, he also was out with 2 separate injuries, in his case for 4 matches. So it seems to be more of a case of injury-stricken players in this position. The last possible candidate is Stefan El Shaarawy, and he's 32 years old, 31 caps and 7 goals since 2012. And he plays for Roma in Italy. He actually spent a little time in China before that. So it was Roma since 2016 with a couple of years in China. Kind of been in and out of the team. He's been part of tournaments since the 2013 Confederations Cup. But he wasn't selected for the World Cup in 2014 or the Euro 2020, and was actually off the team for a while when he returned in October 2023 and just started 1 of their remaining 6 games there, was on the bench for 2, but then not selected for the last 2 matches. So El Shaarawy has always kind of struggled to get his foot into the team. And there we have it, 4 possible candidates. Let's summarize the position. So in the first 8 games, 6 different players held the position. And in one of those 6 games, this position didn't actually exist in the 3-5-2 formation. So really all over the place here. Some of those players were out of position players, and some of them were the players that we just covered here. Among them, Zaccagni was the only one to play the position twice. However, in 3 of the last 4 games, Chiesa took over the spot. In the last game, it was Pellegrini, who's actually coded as an attacking midfielder. We've just moved him here. Pellegrini started in the last game just as he had in the first, so kind of coming full circle there, but the position fairly undecided, although Chiesa seems to have a good chance of it. A lot of it may depend on their fitness. None of them is listed as injured, so but some of them may be coming back from injury. Okay, let's move over to the right attackers and begin with a likely candidate in Nicolo Zaniolo and a possible candidate in Domenico Berardi. Actually, sorry, we have here too several possible candidates. So Berardi is merely the first of them. We also have Matteo Politano, Wilfred Gnonto, and Riccardo Orsolino. So lots of candidates to look at here as well, but we don't have anyone below that level. So let's go back to look at Nicolo Zaniolo, 24 years old and 19 caps and 2 goals since 2019. He plays for, or is on the roster of Galatasaray in Turkey since 2023, but actually has been on loan to Aston Villa in England. He was with Roma for 5 years before that. Not selected for the 2020 Euro squad. Injury may have played a role in his non-selection there. And he has started 4 of their 12 games since the start of 2023 and was subbed in for 4 as well, but not selected for 4 matches. However, Nicolo Zaniolo is out with an injury since late May. He only missed the last game of the season, but the source I have is a bit mystifying. It calls it bone splintering. So that's what the injury is listed at, bone splintering. It sounds truly horrible. Anyway, for our purposes, the key point is that it's an unknown return date. So Zaniolo may not be available, and we'll have to update that later on. Our next candidate, Domenico Berardi, I won't even get into the bio with him, except to say that he was a starter in Euro 2020, but he has been, or he will be out until next October because he's undergoing surgery on his Achilles tendon. And the poor guy has struggled with 5 separate injuries over the last 2 years. So Domenico Berardi, really not a candidate here. But I do want to say what their likelihood would have been had the injury not been. So we think Zaniolo would have been likely and Berardi would have been possible. The next 3 possible candidates then had the door open for them a little bit. The first one is Matteo Politano, and he is 31 years old and has only 13 caps and 4 goals since 2017 and plays for Napoli in Italy since 2021. Over the period, he started 2 of their 12 games and subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for one. He wasn't selected for 6 games, though, including the last 2 matches. And I should say, too, that he wasn't selected for the Euro Cup either. He made the preliminary squad, but not the final call. So Matteo Politano, kind of always struggling to really get his foot in the door, but this may be his chance with the players ahead of him out of the picture. Next, we have Wilfried Gnonto. And he's 20 years old, but he has 13 caps and 1 goal already since 2022 and played for Leeds United in England since 2022. He got his first cap in June of 2022 and has been, or he was selected consistently until September 2023, but then he was injured and kind of off the team. He was also playing with the under-21 team there. So I remember he was kind of hot for a while in the Premier League, and then of course Leeds was relegated. So I'm not sure how influential he's been since then. Anyway, Wilfried Gnonto, a possible candidate, and again, the open positions may benefit him. Finally, we have Riccardo Orsolino, and he has 6 caps and 2 goals for the national team since 2019, playing for Bologna in Italy since 2019, and he returned after an almost 3-year absence, didn't start any games, but was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 1. So that's the 4 possible candidates there, or actually just 3 since Berardi is out. Let's summarize the position. It was Berardi, who is actually coded as a forward, if I didn't mention that. Berardi started in the position, but here again, a number of players were used at first, only Politano twice. In the second half of the period, though, Berardi played it 3 times in a row, then Zaniolo twice in 2 of the last 3. However, with both Berardi and Zaniolo likely out now, it's anybody's guess as to who will step into the position. So the June games will be important there to see who they have in mind for the position. Let's move on to central attacking midfielders. And if you think about the 4-3-3, the formation is not used. Indeed, it's not used in any of the formation they use. So no surprise that we don't have any really viable candidates here. We have 2 players coded as attacking midfielders who seem to be off the team. So the first one is Matteo Pezzeni. He was selected for the Euro 2020 squad, and he did start 1 of their games in this period and was on the bench for 2, but he wasn't selected for the last 6 matches. So Pezzeni not looking like part of the squad here. The second one is Alessandro Florenzi. He was also selected for Euro 2020, in fact, the starter in game one, but lost his starting position. And he has not appeared for the national team since June of 2022. So we might have actually put him in the section one retirement section. He's still playing club soccer Florenti for AC Milan, but doesn't seem to be part of Italy at the moment. So again, summary of the position is that it's not used. So we go to the forwards now. We don't have anyone coded as a secondary striker here, so just forwards to look at. And we have a definite candidate in Giacomo Raspadori, and then a likely candidate in Matteo Retegui. And then a few possible candidates, actually just, a few. Let's go through them. Ciro Immobile, just a possible candidate here. Gianluca Scamacca and Moise Keane, also at the possible level. And then at the possible but unlikely level, Lorenzo Luca. One of my sources had him on the bench for their March 2024 game, but my main source didn't. So again, we'll bring him up if he appears in the final or even the preliminary squad for the Cup. And then a player who seems to be off the squad, Andrea Bellotti, was one of the players for the 2022 Euro Cup that was selected. He was a substitute in that tournament, but last appeared for the team in June 2022, so not a consideration here either. Let's go back and look at the main candidates then. Giacomo Raspadori is 24 years old and has 26 caps and 6 goals since 2021. For Italy, and plays for Napoli in Spain since 2023. He was with Sassuolo before that. He was selected for Euro 2020 just as a substitute in that tournament, but since then, or since the start of 2023, has started 6 of their 12 games, as well as subbing in for 3 and on the bench for 1. In fact, the only matches that he missed were the first 2 where he was injured. So Raspadori, a definite candidate for selection here. Matteo Retegui is our likely candidate. He's 25 years old and just with the team since 2023 and 6 caps in that time, but 4 goals in those 6 games. So that's quite promising. Retegui was born in Argentina. He's with Genoa in Italy now since 2023, but was with clubs in Argentina before that, mainly Boca Juniors, including their youth club. But he was loaned out from Boca Juniors to some other clubs. So Retegui got his first cap in March of 2023 and has started 4 of their remaining 12 games over the period, as well as subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 2. He was injured for 4 matches, though. Those were the only ones he wasn't selected for. So Retegui looking like a likely candidate. Ciro Immobile is the first of our possible candidates. He's 34 years old now, with 57 caps and 17 goals since 2014, and has been part of all tournaments since 2014. Including Euro 2020, where he was a starter. But he was off the team for a period after that, for 15 months. That period included 3 separate injuries. But he came back in June 2023 and started 2 of their remaining 10 games, on the bench for 2, and a further injury for 2 matches. But Immobile was not selected for the last 4 matches. So possible or even unlikely is Ciro Immobile. We'll have to see. Next, Gianluca Scamacca is 25 years old and has 15 caps and 1 goal since 2021. He is with Atalanta in Italy now since 2022, but he did spend a year with West Ham in England before that. Scamacca started 1 of their 12 games. He was also subbed in for 5. but not selected for the last 2 matches, Scamacca. So again, a possible candidate. And the last of our possible candidates is Moise Keane. He is 24 years old and has 15 caps and 4 goals since 2018. And he plays for Juventus in Italy since 2023. He also spent some time in England with Everton on their roster from 2019 to 2023, but he was loaned out to a couple of teams. Not selected for Euro. He was on the preliminary squad there, but not the final squad. And recently has returned. He returned after a 2-year absence in October of 2023, started one of their remaining 6 games and subbed in for 2, but not selected for the 3 others. But I believe he was on the squad in the March 2024 games. So maybe among these has the best chance. We'll have to see. Let's summarize the position of forward. Usually it's just one. When we look at the 4-3-3, we consider 1 centre forward and kind of 2 left attacker and right attacker positions. So we look at that as just a single centre forward. And but a couple of times there were 2 forwards in the formation they used. Retegui played the role in 3 of the first 4 games, and then basically Raspadori took over, although others popped up during that time. So Immobile had 2 starts there, and I believe any of the Scamacca, I believe Scamacca had 1 start. Retegui actually did return for the second last game and started that, but Raspadori is the main man to this point. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the look at our players. So we move on to section 3 and begin with some closing thoughts. So really what we see here is a lot of variety in the players, so a lot of uncertainty in the positions. There's only a couple of positions that will be able to really highlight a starter. And some of the positions are really all over the place with several candidates, or even we're not sure who the candidate might be. And that actually just takes us into the next section where we're going to race through the list again and see if we can nominate any starters here. So let's do that. Just need to kind of organize my my document here to do that. And we begin with the manager. Pretty confident that the Luciano Spalletti won't be replaced before the tournament, so we'll call him a definite starter. And Donnarumma, the most stable position on the squad, Captain Donnarumma as goalkeeper, definitely the starter there. And it looks like Vicario is the backup, having replaced him in the last game there. Central defence, we had no definite or likely candidates, and then a whole whack of possible candidates, and none of whom have played more than half of the game. So we're not going to nominate any starter, let alone a starting pair. It looks like Francesco Acerbi is the most likely among them, but they've really all been in and out quite a bit. So maybe the June games will shed some light on that. Over to left back, Federico Di Marco. Again, relatively speaking, he does look like among the most likely of starters for them, but he did only start 7 of their 12 games. So we're not confident that he's going to be a starter. Maybe I'll put him in blue to indicate that probably a starter. Destiny Udogie, who seemed to be moving into the backup position, is out with an injury, as we'll see when we look at injuries. So we're not really sure who the backup will be over there. On the right back, it's not that much different. Di Lorenzo looks like the starter, especially when it's a left back position rather than when when the position pushes up to the midfield. So we'll highlight Di Lorenzo. No, I'm not going to do that because it could be Darmian who kind of alternates in the position with him. Let's highlight them both and say it's going to be one or more likely both of them alternating based on what we've seen so far. For the defensive and central midfielders, again, we have three candidates who it'll probably be among, and there are sometimes two positions here. So the candidates are Jorginho, Cristante, and then Locatelli. But again, we're not confident enough to nominate any of them. Jorginho started 5 games, and Cristante, sorry, I'm just looking it up here, only 4, and then Locatelli 3. So none of that gives us confidence enough to nominate one of them, but we do kind of think it'll be among those 3, or perhaps a new name, one of the lesser names in there might pop up. However, for right midfielders, I mean, for Nicolo Barella plays as a right and a left midfielder, so he is one of the candidates we can confidently nominate as a starter, though we can't necessarily say what his position will be. David Fertizi started 6 of their games, so is possible as a starter, but we're not confident enough to nominate him there. And no other player among the left midfielders really stands out to us as a starter. So as I said, kind of confusing or difficult to predict what Italy's team will be. It's the same among the attacking midfield, the left attackers. In recent terms, it does look like Federico Chiesa would be the starter because he started 3 of the last 4, but those are the only 3 games he started over the last 12 games. So we're not really confident to nominate him, although he does seem the most likely. Over on the right, for right attackers, an interesting situation because the main candidates, Nicolo Zaniolo and Domenico Berardi, are both out, which we'll review shortly. So that opens the door for some of the players who haven't been receiving many starts, but particularly this position seems really open. We have no idea who it will be. It could even be someone playing out of position. So no highlights for us there. And we go to forwards, and possibly because this is a bit of a halo effect because we're highlighting so few players, we might highlight Raspadori. But again, I'm only going to give it blue because he's only started 6 of their 12 games. Even if he was kind of the main selection at the end, he was still replaced from time to time. So Raspadori there. Retegui seems the most consistent backup here, whereas a couple of other of the possible candidates weren't there for the last 2 games, so we can't have much confidence in that. Okay, so a bit of a difficult time reviewing possible starters there. Let's go on to the third order of business here, reviewing injuries. So we have several on the squad, but only one of them is expected back. That is left back Leonardo Spinazzola, out with a hamstring injury since mid-May. That's usually a long-term injury, but not always, and he is expected back on May 29th. However, we only had him as a possible but unlikely candidate anyway. More relevant then is Domenico Berardi, who was starting quite a bit, but he had Achilles tendon surgery, so he's definitely out and not due back until next October, so no chance of him coming back. The other one who's definitely out is Sandro Tonali. It's not an injury, but it's a suspension that continues until August 2024 over betting. So we talked about that a little bit in the main part of the podcast. And then we have 2 injuries with unknown return dates. The first of them is sorry, I had to cough there, is Destiny Udogie. So he's out with a hamstring injury. As I said, that's usually a bit of a longer term thing. He picked that up in late April. So fairly recently, and Udogie has an unknown return date. We had him as a possible candidate, just as we would have had Berardi and Tonali also as possible candidates, but now they're out. And then a likely candidate was Nicolo Zaniolo, and he picked up an injury in May. In late May, horrifically described as a bone splintering on the website. So we don't really know what that means, but it is an unknown return date for him. So perhaps we'll be able to shed some light on that in the second part of the podcast, which leads me into our last order of business, which is just introducing part 2, which will come out when the squads are finalized, and at that time we'll cover any notable non-selections. I don't think there'll be really any surprises on Italy as to players that we expected, because we don't expect that many players to definitely be selected. Anyway, we will make note of any surprise inclusions and new players. We could see that from Italy, and then we will update any information we learn on the injuries that we just talked about. So we hope that helps you to enjoy when you see Italy players step onto the field. But stay tuned for part 2, and we'll update it once the final rosters come out. We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Big Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.